this is a bruising business. There's a lot of orphan projects. There's time elapsed between projects.
Yeah.
When you think one thing's going to start, the other thing falters. When one thing falters, the other thing blossoms.
Yeah.
And puts you in the driver's seat. I want to get a sense of, since we're at a lab location, what does the Arkansas Cinema Society mean to you today? And sort of like, if you can do a lineage between what you're doing in the next couple of days and perhaps that cinephilia and
yeah, that all makes sense. Well, the truth is, the idea for the Arkansas Cinema Society came when I went back to Arkansas to screen Loving. And, you know, I just kind of was calling friends in Little Rock saying, hey, I want to show my movie to people. And there was no real centralized mailing list or organization or anything. You know, there's the State Film Commission, but that's not what they do. They're there to scout projects and help bring new projects in. And it was like, why is there no community here that I can just send an email to or somehow connect into? So that was the initial thought. The Renault brothers were from Little Rock and had started the Little Rock Film Festival a while back, but it had shuttered. So there really was nothing, and that was only one time of the year. And so the original, you know, impetus was really selfish. It was like, I just want to connect some people so I can show them the stuff I'm doing because I'm really proud of it. And it's like, here, I'm coming home and I want to show you guys. And then I sat with a friend that I went to high school with, who was in the film business and was living in Little Rock, and she wanted to do something similar. She wanted to restart a festival. And I was like, well, you know, festivals are one time a year, and they almost feel like, I don't know, transitory. Like, I want to actually build a little bit more of a community, or connect, I think, more than build a community. So I said, let's do something year-round, because I had come out of Austin. I was inspired by Richard Linklater and the Austin Film Society. You know, like early on in my career with Shotgun Stories, they had an incredible grant program where if you'd gone to a film festival, you could like submit your like travel documents, and they'd send you like $100 grant. You know, and I was so broke at the time that was a big deal. Like that was a lifesaver, because I was going all over the world to all these festivals, and I was so broke. You know, so I'd been really inspired by the Austin Film Society, and then, you know, you form a nonprofit and you get a board together and you do all these things and start raising money, and you have to really start to define your ethos. You have to define really why you're asking for these things, more than, hey, I want to put together a mailing list so I can show people my movie. And you start asking yourself, you know, yeah, you want to bring this industry down to earth a little bit for people. When I was in college, my junior year, I got an internship with Kodak in the American Pavilion. It took me to Cannes. I waited tables at the American Pavilion. And as maybe, you know, not star-studded as that sounds, it was incredible. And people would tip me in tickets to the Palais. My mom had bought me a tuxedo from Dillard's. And I got to see my first film at the Palais.
What was it?
I should know this. I've long forgotten it. It was a Japanese film about gay samurai. I know that.
Taboo?
It might have been Taboo. I need to look. No one's ever come up with the title before. This would have been 2000, I think.
It's the Takashi Kitano movie.
There you go. I've been looking for it forever. I was half, you know, I was kind of out of it. I didn't know anything about anything back then. But being from a place where films are not made, and this is kind of the through line to your real question. This can seem like a magical business. It can seem like a thing that doesn't really exist, and real people don't really do this stuff. Even though when you go to make a film, it's very pragmatic. It's very nuts and bolts, problem solving, and I think could be open to a lot of people. It's a process I really like. And so with the Arkansas Cinema Society, I wanted to give people the experience I had in Cannes, in the sense that I wanted them to lay eyes on it. Let's bring these people. I'm friends with filmmakers. I'm friends with famous people. Let's bring them to Little Rock. Just have them sit and talk, which could seem, I don't know, like fluff, but it's not. When you hear people that make movies speak and you can see them in the flesh, it really does have an impact on people's concept that they can be a part of it. And so, taking that through line here to Marrakech, you know, you've got these communities, the Atlas workshops specifically, serving Africa and the Middle East. People just need to talk to people that make movies, because a 30-minute conversation with me will prove I'm not a rocket scientist, and it actually makes the thing more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
It's less about, hey, let me show you the ropes, although there's some of that for sure. There's a lot of it, because whether you make a movie in Africa or you make a movie on the continent of North America, you're still going to be dealing with probably 80% of the same problems in terms of trying to take written words or ideas and translate them into visual images that then give an emotional impact. So the math is kind of always the same. But I think the importance of showing up, and maybe they've seen my films, maybe they haven't, but I can at least tell them what it's like in the trenches, and maybe that'll bring this whole thing back down to earth just a little bit.
Great. Amazing.
So, I mean, I know you've spoken about, like, you're kind of like returning to the Arkansas earth for your next project, or for one of the projects that you're developing.
Yeah, I did a lot.
Can you tell us anything more about that? Like, very curious.
Well, it's tricky, and I should say this, because I mentioned that on the red carpet. They were kind of pulling for something, because I am excited about it. But my first position job are the Corman McCarthy adaptations, because that's what I'm being paid to do, and so that's my day job, and they're incredibly challenging. I don't know if you guys read those books.
Well,
The
one of them is
Passenger and
just
Stella
all
Maris.
dialogue, right?
Yeah, it's just interviews with a woman. It's kind of like if somebody walked up with Plato's Republic and was like, "You think this would make a good movie?" There are brilliant concepts in it. There are brilliant ideas in it. And yes, he's created a plot and he's created characters that can be very compelling ideas for a movie. But I don't think that's the purpose of those books. The purpose of those books, I think, is to bring out these really big ideas and themes that McCarthy's been working on his entire career. It's an extraordinary book.
Does it facilitate things? Does it, like, do you feel like you're operating in the shadow? I mean, like with Oppenheimer having just won all those Oscars
There's a lot of talk of Oppenheimer in these books.
And so, I mean, it's about two children whose father was part of the Manhattan Project, among other loftier topics as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, do you sort of, like, do you feel like you're kind of, a rising tide lifts all ships, or
retread?
I don't know.
It doesn't feel retread because it's just so original, and because that's not the main. Well, it's hard to say it's not the main thrust of the book, because it actually might be the idea of whatever the Architron is, for all those McCarthy fans out there on the Reddit pages. I definitely, I think what will be beneficial about Oppenheimer being in the public consciousness, that's if these ever get made. Just because I write them doesn't mean anyone's going to make them. And it doesn't mean I'll necessarily even crack a visual language to bring these things to life, because they're in a written language, and that's a different art form. These are two different things, that we're working in. McCarthy writes beautiful imagery, but that's not the sole purpose of his writing. So we'll see, if I could even come close to writing a thing that can be its own thing, that it wants to be a film. That'll be the first question. But the great thing about Oppenheimer is he makes so many casual references to it. Now there's just a greater understanding. I think pre-Nolan's film, people wouldn't have known much. Maybe the one famous quote, and that's about it. So it might actually help as a knowledge base for kind of, or a launch pad for taking off the rest of the story.
Would the film maybe, in some sort of capacity work as a companion piece, at least in sort of a public touchstone?
I think it could, yeah. I don't think that's a stretch. But, for me, it was an uncanny read, because New Regency had the rights. They were making the Bikeriders.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was making it, they're like, hey, would you read this book? And which, of course, I was like, I'm making a movie. I don't have time to read a Cormac McCarthy book right now. But as soon as I finished that Christmas, the Christmas after, I sat and read it. And there's just these weird coincidences, maybe I just see them that way, but I mean, it opens in the exact same spot where we shot The End of Mud, at the mouth of the Mississippi River. It has these kind of nighttime highway driving scenes, like straight out of Midnight Special. there's some ideas of what's real and not real, kind of like take shelter. Like there were a lot of things that I saw, which probably speaks more to the depth of McCarthy than or a direct relationship to my films. But I at least was having some kind of personal resonance with the books as I was reading them. That still doesn't mean I understand anything about what they're really about.
You talked about like the Cormac McCarthy Reddit, Redditors. There's also the recent like Vanity Fair kind of turgidly written article about his personal life.
Yeah, we feasted on that.
What was it? What is it like to like be doing a Cormac McCarthy adaptation and
have all of this coming out?
Yeah,
I mean that article was fascinating, and you could just see it. You could see that young woman at 16 walk up to that motel pool with a Western pistol hanging on her side, and with a copy of Cormac's book. Can I get your signature in my book? I mean, it must have blown his mind. And it makes sense that became his muse for the rest of his career. That all kind of laid down for me. And the fact that she's a direct inspiration potentially for Alicia Western. It's fairly interesting. I don't know. This kind of happened with Loving as well, though, in the sense that you have this very important thing, and your relationship to it is at best tangential. But at some point, as a filmmaker, you have to try to take ownership of some piece of it to turn it into a film. That doesn't mean it's yours. Loving's not mine. Loving is theirs, Richard and Mildred's, and their children. But I had to, at some point, get over myself a little bit and say, I'm gonna sit down and I have to write words for these people and I have to do this. The same feeling with McCarthy. Like at some point, you got to say, I get it. He's smarter than I am, and more prolific. But I have to understand this for me, and try to put that into a story, a visual medium, and maybe if it's lucky enough to get made, maybe that'll resonate with some people. Am I going to miss some things? Am I going to see it differently than other people? Absolutely, because the way he writes things is so. It's purposefully left open to interpretation. It demands it. And so, at some point you have to kind of accept the fact that your point of view is just going to be yours, and kind of start putting one foot in front of the other in terms of the adaptations. So that also applies to all of this other stuff coming out. You're like, okay, that's cool. That's another piece of the puzzle. Does it directly affect what I'm doing? I don't think so. It's just cool because I've become a bit of a part-time McCarthy scholar. There are real McCarthy scholars in the world, and I'm not one of them. But I live in Austin. It's 40 minutes away from Texas State, which has the entire McCarthy writing collection. So I got to go and read his first draft of The Passenger, which was, I think, from 2007. And that was interesting because it was like, oh, I see. He's human. Because it doesn't just come out, as The Passenger and Stella Maris. You could see his thinking. You could see how he was developing from 2007 to 2019, whenever he finished his draft. So it's kind of part of the process, almost like we were talking about earlier, of demystifying the whole thing. The other project, it's I carry these things around for a long time. When I'm in kind of writing seminars and classes, I talk about it. I don't write anything down for a long time. A lot of times I'll go out to breakfast with friends and I'll just kind of start to tell these stories. And it takes about a year or so. And it's like a tape ball. You just kind of keep adding to it, and eventually it gains some density and warrants kind of coming out of you and going out onto some note cards. And then I start to outline it. And then it goes onto the page finally. That's the last step. But I've been working on this one for a few years, just kind of noodling on it in different forms. And I had a theme that I really liked, an idea that became kind of the central idea of this story. And I wanted to go back, having made 2 films based on other people's lives and work. And also in the midst of the McCarthy thing, just go back to my own thing where I'm just completely in charge of the universe, I'm completely in charge of the world. And also go back to a film of a certain scale. I'd taken this big period between Loving and the Bikeriders, and a big majority of that was writing this giant sci-fi project, which I'm in love with. But that thing will never be made at a smaller scale. The way I've always kind of done it, it's like, this is how much money I would like, and then the world goes, this is how much money you're going to get, and then you reconstruct the thing in order to do that. That's independent filmmaking. I remember with Take Shelter, you kind of walk around with everybody's second film. You're like, I think I need like $2 million. You're like, really? Do you? I think we're gonna give you $650,000. That's what I think we're gonna give you. Same with Loving, though. You know, we went out at about $15 million with that project, and it was like the world wanted to give you 10. That's what that wanted to be. With that cast, with me, that story, 10, which was great. It was a beautiful film. It was a beautiful filmmaking experience. With this big sci-fi film, what are you gonna do? You know, it's $100 million. You're gonna make it 90? Okay. Still don't have that. So at some point you're having to go enter a system.
We'll see what the Zellner brothers do with their
I can't wait.
sci-fi thing.
I can't wait to see it. I'm buddies with those guys.
They're Texas co-creators of yours.
Oh man, they're so great.
So is it less daunting when it's your material? And in the case of this project that you're working on, I imagine there's a huge amount of research because you want to get the period, you want to get the time right. Do you have to?
For which one? For the Bikeriders or for
the
Loving?
land? The land of
Land of Opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, Land of Opportunity is my sci-fi one, and it's so no, I just had to create an entire alien species.
Okay.
You know, so that's why that took about 3 years. And you know, you started like the clock started ticking in 2016. That's when Fox and I and Emma Watts over at Fox, who was great, you know, started kind of talking to me about it. So I had the kernel of the idea, but then I had to go do the work. And you're creating this species and how they breed and where their level of intelligence is compared to ours and where their technology is compared to ours. And it's a bunch, you know. And so that's why that took so long. So when the rug got kind of pulled out underneath that one, you felt like a trapeze artist, you know, and you were just out of reach. Because to that point, you know, you started the conversation with saying, you know, you've got these projects and one goes, one doesn't go. I'd never really been like that. I'd been really, really fortunate that I kind of wrote something and then I went to go make it. Mm-hmm. That's because I was willing to do it in that indie model where you say, okay, oh, we can't do it this way. Well, how do we get to do it? And let's figure that out. You know, Mud kind of came together and was the biggest leap in terms of budgets for me and cast and, you know, and that was just because of the strength of Take Shelter out in the world. It kind of felt like it rode, you know, a wave that was kind of pushing me right into Mud. But still, those were, I guess, what's reasonable? I don't know. What's a reasonable amount of money to make a movie? They're all ridiculous. But you know, as soon as I shifted into amounts of money that I had to be in the studio system.
That's the question.
I am talking too much, but that's when it changed, and so this next project is back in a world where, okay, let's see what the world will give us for this, because I think I'm going to go make it no matter what.
Yeah.
What's a reasonable amount of time for a filmmaker to go without being on set? You know, you're saying like.
I mean, I don't know. Look at Malik, but you know, I think I'll answer it this way: there's a benefit to less time. Midnight Special and Loving were the closest I got together, and I remember being adamant about 45 days for Loving. Loving was only a 96, 97 page script. Now it was a period piece, so that freaked me out a little bit. But I just left Midnight Special, which was a longer script, but much more complex. You know, a lot of night photography, a lot of, you know, chase sequences at night in cars, just the worst stuff you can shoot and schedule. And we had about 40 days for that, about 42 days for that. And I just remember thinking, I want 45 days. And Loving was a beautiful experience because of that, and I wouldn't have pushed that had I not just come off of a film set.
But I mean more like, you know, you wrapped the Bikeriders about a year ago.
Yeah.
You have what seems to be like at least another year of development on the Cormac McCarthy project.
Yeah.
Is there this like impetus? You're just like, I need to shoot something right now.
Definitely, and that's part of just where I'm at in my life. And the 6 years I took off, didn't take off. I was working, and I think that's something people don't realize. Because I'm always working. It's just you all don't see it. Mm-hmm. But there is value to being out in the world with the thing you've made. And I don't think I really realized that, just how important that was. Because I was off just doing my thing. Then the pandemic hit, and that kind of exacerbated the timeline for sure. I mean, that added 2 years.
Sure, everyone.
Yeah. But it still counts, you know, against me in a way, it feels like. But now I'm 45 years old, about to be 46. And I'm 6 films in. I feel like I'm ready to go get some work done. I'm ready to be a little more prolific. You know, similar to the way I was in the early teens. You know, those were 4 movies back to back to back to back. It was really hard and challenging on my life and my family. But now my son's 14, you know, my wife and I are in a great place. And it's like, all right, let's go get to work. And so the hope is maybe I can actually pull off the McCarthy adaptation. It'd be a miracle, but hopefully I can. Then we've got this other one, and I've got 2 others that I'm setting up to start, you know, writing next year. And that doesn't even count Yankee Comandante, which is just sitting in the wings. The problem with that one is it's another one where I just haven't been able to like limit the budget. It's a David Lean film, you know, and I want to make it as such. And it's a war film in many ways. And so there's not an $18 million version of that I can pull out of my, you know, hat. It kind of needs to live where it needs to live. It's why the Bikeriders was a miracle. I mean, I took a semi-obscure book of photography from the 1960s and turned it into a feature film that got an international film release with a bunch of movie stars in it. It doesn't happen every day, you know. So I count myself very lucky to have gotten that one out.
It's a great movie.
Well, I appreciate that, though. I wasn't cruising for a compliment. It was just the fact it exists is interesting to me. You know?
So you as a journalistic malpractice not to go back. You said there's 2 more projects you're setting up next year?
Well, contracts aren't signed on those yet, so I probably shouldn't talk about them. But yeah, I think about my life in writing periods and productive periods. So if I want to be making a film next fall, which I do, we got to start pre-production by June. So that means I have between now and the end of May to write. Got the McCarthy thing, got this other thing I'm working on. I think I can get 2 more done. That would be the most prolific I've ever been in my life. Although I wrote Take Shelter in Mud in the same summer. So I've done it before. I'm ready to do it again. The ideas are there. They're great. They're projects I love. You know, there are no projects on that list that are like, I gotta go do this. They're all things that I think could be films, could be beautiful films, things I would be proud to be involved in. So my hope is write like a madman until the end of May. And I know I'm not giving you the answer you want in terms of specifics.
I'm asking you a question. You're giving me an answer. That's what I want.
But this is how my brain's going. I'd love to talk. I mean, you guys don't understand. I love talking about my movies. I love it to death.
Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.